Bea Arthur and Betty White were friends on Golden Girls, but many people don't know that they had a vicious feud behind the scenes. In fact, the bad blood between these two women was so bad that it almost destroyed the show. We'll get more into that story later on. Bea Arthur's personality was always full of contradictions. She was serious, professional, and proper, but she was also honest to her fault with the tendency to become argumentative. Little did she know that this, along with impeccable comedic timing, would make her a star. In 1947, Arthur's acting career was beginning to flourish. She enrolled in the New School's School of Drama and had taken her first steps in her journey to success. It did not take long for Arthur's career to begin to bloom. Following her days at the New School, she joined an off-Broadway group connected to the Cherry Lane Theater. It was somewhere around this time that she made a new friend, Gene Saks. Saks was a fellow actor who would go on to take up directing. He was also the next step in Arthur's journey. The two fell in love and ended up getting married that same year, although she never took his name. It seemed that Arthur had learned the value of carving out her own identity. After their marriage, their respective careers thrived. Both of them appeared on television throughout the 1950s, and Arthur supported a flourishing Broadway career during that time as well. During the 70s, there was one name that was larger than any other when it came to television production: Norman Lear. Lear would go on to produce many of the iconic films of the 70s and 80s, but in 1971, he only had a small handful of failed film credits to his name when All in the Family aired. Despite this, Bea Arthur took a chance. She accepted the role of Maud Finley. It was a guest appearance that would air in December of 1971 as part of the series' second season. Outspoken, passionate, and liberal, the writers wrote Maud to be the opposite of the series' lead, Archie Bunker. The character would also become the quintessential essence of a Bea Arthur performance. Although she was merely a guest star in a solo episode of All in the Family, she made an impression that no one could ignore. Viewers absolutely adored her, and CBS executives could not deny her. In Arthur's recollections from that single performance, the executives asked, "Who is that girl? Let's give her her own series." And they did. Using an episode of All in the Family as a backdoor pilot, Maud aired in September of 1972. It followed Arthur's Maud and Walter Finlay, her character's fourth husband. The show was unique in its episode formatting. Although there were other series regulars, many episodes featured only Maud and Walter. Most importantly, the series never backed down from controversial topics. It quickly gained a reputation for never shying away from hard-hitting topics that other shows might have skirted around or avoided altogether. During its 6-year run, it covered themes like divorce, addiction, spousal mistreatment, menopause, Vietnam mental health, and gay rights. But few episodes of television have ever made such a big scandal as 1972's two-part special Maud's Dilemma. Even today, discussions that involve a woman's body are rare and somewhat controversial when presented on TV. They were almost unheard of on television in the 1970s. In Maud's Dilemma, Maud discovers that she is pregnant. At the age of 47, this is an unexpected and frankly unwanted wrench in her life. The entire two-part episode follows her, her family, and her friends as she attempts to come to terms with what she wants to do. In the end, she, along with the support of her husband, decides that raising a baby is the wrong choice for their current stage of life. So she decides to terminate the pregnancy. The episode aired 2 months before they announced the Roe v. Wade decision, and viewer reactions were extreme. Many people spoke out against it, and several regional affiliates of the network refused to participate in the episode. This was the first time in history any CBS station refused to air an episode of an ongoing series. But the show had even bigger problems. Despite several years of success, it couldn't keep up with the changing times. As the 70s had started to come to an end, it struggled to compete with comedies like Laverne and Shirley and Three's Company. It seemed that America was done with hard-hitting topics, and they wanted their television to allow them to escape, and Maude, with her strong stances, didn't fit the bill. It was then that Arthur announced her intention to leave Maude, ending the show. Arthur would see a similar ending within her own life that same year. Despite 28 years of marriage and 2 sons who were not quite grown yet, Arthur and Sax's marriage was in trouble. As a calendar flip from 1977 to 1978, the pair decided that their relationship was beyond saving. They divorced that year. While Sax went on to remarry, Arthur would remain without another significant relationship for the rest of her life, not that she needed it. Following the conclusion of Maude, her career ended a brief period of inactivity. She made a handful of guest appearances and attempted to launch another sitcom, Amanda's, that did not really make an impact. She even returned to the stage, but none of it was sticking. She was merely passing the time, holding in wait until her next big opportunity came up, or one she wasn't quite sure would happen at this point. When beknownst to Arthur, her next opportunity was already brewing in August of 1984. The setting was Burbank, California, and NBC was filming a television special designed to introduce their upcoming season. Selma Diamond and Doris Roberts, 2 actresses in prominent shows at the time, performed a skit spoofing Miami Vice. Its premise? Miami Nice. 2 old people living in Miami. This simple skit would change the course of Arthur's career. Present that day, watching Diamond and Roberts hammer it up, was Warren Littlefield, the senior vice president of NBC. This skit sparked a vision, a series based on the premise of Miami Nice. Middle-aged women living together and getting into misadventures. Miami Nice went through several changes once it was in development. Littlefield met with a couple of producers who got a writer on board. Originally, the women of Miami Nice were meant to be in their 40s. The writer Susan Harris came back with a pilot that involved women in their 60s. But she impressed Littlefield. This pilot would become Golden Girls. All it needed was a cast. But it didn't come as easy for Bea Arthur as you might think. It is impossible to imagine now, but Golden Girls almost happened without her. Estelle Getty was cast first to play Sophia Petrillo. Then they brought on Rue McClanahan and Betty White, though not in the roles you would expect. The cast was set, but they needed their Dorothy, and Bea Arthur wasn't exactly on anyone's radar. When Harris had been writing the script, she had envisioned Dorothy as a Bea Arthur type, but the producers had a different vision in mind. They wanted Elaine Stritch for the part. The series would have looked quite different if not for one critical fact. Stritch completely failed her audition. The program needed someone else, and fast. Arthur's name started to be passed around. But there was one problem. She didn't want the part. Arthur was obviously the solution to the problem, and Harris had practically written the role with her in mind. So how were they going to get their final star? Well, they could use their secret weapon. They'd send in Rue McClanahan, of course. The 2 women had worked together during Maude. The producers thought that this connection would be to their advantage, but it was quite the opposite. Arthur loved the script, but she did have a concern. She didn't want to repeat Maude. She felt that her role and McClanahan's roles were too similar to the past, one she had no interest in repeating, and for good reason, too. You see, although McClanahan and White were cast first, they were not initially cast in the roles they ended up with. McClanahan was originally cast as Rose, thanks to her similar character on Maude, and White was cast as Blanche, again due to a similar character that she'd played on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Eventually, the director they hired for the plot suggested that the 2 women switch roles, saving the show in more ways than one. It was only after she heard that McClanahan and White had switched roles that Arthur agreed to be on the show. The cast were set. The Golden Girls were ready to rock the world, going on to become one of the highest-praised television shows of all time. But things behind the scenes were not quite as golden. Despite her talent, Bea Arthur was an oddball. She was set in her ways, and no one could convince her to break from them. She had no tolerance for birds or chewing gum. Her Golden Girls contract stated that she could walk around set barefoot as long as she didn't sue if she became injured, because she hated shoes so much. These tendencies started to get in the way of her working relationships, especially with one co-worker in particular. Arthurs all across the globe adored actress Betty White. Her cheerful disposition endeared her to the hearts of many. But it might have been this very cheerful disposition that irked Arthur. In one interview, White insisted that Arthur found her a pain, citing her positive attitude as the source of the problem. She said, "Sometimes if I was happy, she'd be furious," although there might have been more to it. Bea Arthur's eldest son, Matthew Sachs, let his knowledge of his mother shed some light on the so-called feud between the two actresses. And he didn't let his love for his mother cloud his judgment. In his opinion, Arthur unknowingly carried the attitude that it was fun to have somebody to be angry at. And White was an easy target. Betty White and Bea Arthur, while both talented, were very different actors. While this background was in the theater, even her days with Norman Lear mimicked that theatrical acting. White, on the other hand, used a more subtle means of acting. She cut her chops with Mary Tyler Moore. It was more about character. There was, however, one thing in particular that drove Arthur absolutely crazy. Again, Matthew provided some insight into his mother's state of mind when they were filming The Golden Girls. Betty White liked to talk to the audience between takes, and Arthur could not stand this. Due to her background in acting, she felt that it was unprofessional. She didn't have anything against talking to fans, but she felt in between takes was the wrong time and place. Thankfully, though, things weren't all tension between White and Arthur. In the early days of Golden Girls, it seemed that the two women got along, with Matthew even going as far as saying that White and his mother were friends. They lived near each other and would commute to work together. Their co-star McClanahan even recalled that there was a time when Arthur wouldn't go to lunch with her unless White came too. But that all changed in 1986. By the end of The Golden Girls, all of the lead actors would be recognized with an Emmy for their work on the show. But Betty White was the first person to receive the honor in 1986. McClanahan remarked in her memoir that this enraged Arthur, even stating that Arthur called White a choice word. Matthew has a slightly more sympathetic view towards his mother at that moment. When he reflects on this point in his mother's life, he can see where she was coming from, even if he doesn't say that he agrees with it. As Matthew tells it, he said, "I think she felt she was more of an actress than Betty. Mom came from Broadway. Betty starred on a game show at one point. It seemed that there was no coming back for Arthur and White after this moment. Still, despite the so-called feud, the Golden Girls continued to thrive." According to Matthew, Arthur had never been all that close to anyone. She preferred her solitude. But even if White annoyed her to no end, she didn't let it get in the way of the show. McClanahan's memoir recalls, "Things got pretty spicy once in a while, but what mattered most to each of us individually and all of us as a group is that the chemistry worked. The show was more important to all of them, until things took a drastic turn once again. After 7 seasons of The Golden Girls, Arthur shocked the world by announcing that she would be leaving the show. In the years since, she had cited various reasons for this, including feeling that it was time to go. She felt that the writing was not as good as it once had been, and she wanted to leave while it was still favorable. The real reason might have been much darker. The show often made jokes at the expense of all the characters. White, Getty, and McClanahan found it easier to ignore, but Arthur struggled a lot more. This was likely because, while the other actresses' jokes related to their characters, jokes about Dorothy always linked back to Arthur's appearance somehow, that she was big and that she was ugly. In the end, Arthur just couldn't keep doing it. While she may have felt that the Golden Girls had reached its natural conclusion, the other actresses did not. It had gone on record stating that she felt the show ended prematurely. They intended to carry on the story with the remaining 3 actresses in a spin-off, titled The Golden Place. Unfortunately, it was short-lived. Without the author, the magic just wasn't the same. Although Arthur would continue to act in the years following The Golden Girls, even gaining recognition for some of her roles, she never appeared in a major production again. In her later life, she ended up devoting a lot of her time and energy to activism, especially for the LGBTQ+ youth. Of her work with the Ali Fani Center, Arthur said, "These kids at the Ali Fani Center are dumped by their families because they are lesbian, gay, or transgender. This organization is saving lives." So she really threw herself into work that she cared about and committed to organizations that she felt would make a difference in the world. Sadly, the author's story came to an end in April of 2009, when she passed away from lung disease. The world was shocked and upset at her sudden passing. On April 28th, the Broadway community paid tribute to Arthur by dimming the marquees of New York City's Broadway Theater District in her memory for 1 minute at 8:00 p.m. On September 16th, a public tribute to Arthur was held at the Majestic Theater in Manhattan, where friends and colleagues like Angela Lansbury, Norman Lear, Rosie O'Donnell, and Rupert Clanahan all paid tribute to the actress. Arthur's surviving co-stars from the Golden Girls, McClanahan and White, commented on her death via telephone. On the Today Show by phone, Rue said that she and Arthur got along like cream. Betty White said, "I knew it would hurt. I just didn't know it would hurt this much." Which just goes to show you that the two women had a very deep connection, despite the years of feuding on the show. Looking back at Bea Arthur's career, there is so much to be impressed about. To date, only 2 other actresses have received more Emmy nominations, and 2 different actresses more Golden Globe nominations than her. Bea Arthur's talent was undeniable, and she has left a legacy behind her that is difficult to eclipse. If you enjoyed this Factornate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.